The crowd thunders like a storm breaking loose. Red hats blur beneath the blinding rally lights as Trump steps to the microphone, jaw tight, voice booming with grievance. "We're taking back what was stolen!" he shouts, and the audience roars like a wave crashing against reason. Cameras flash. Chants ignite. It feels less like a speech and more like a battle cry. Across the screen, a flicker of contrast. Obama at a quiet town hall, sleeves rolled, voice steady, measured. "The truth," he says softly, "doesn't need to yell to be heard." The sound design shifts. The frenzy fades, replaced by calm clarity. One frame burns with fury, the other with focus. The narrator's voice cuts through, low and deliberate. What happens when arrogance tries to rewrite history, and truth refuses to disappear? Back to the rally. Trump leans forward, smirking, feeding off the echo chamber. "They said I couldn't come back. Well, look who's laughing now." The crowd chants his name, hungry for a fight. But somewhere beyond the noise, another voice is preparing, not to argue, but to remind. A viral clip begins to surface online, a moment caught on camera that no one expected. It's Obama, stepping into the public eye again after months of silence, not with an attack, not with fury, but with a calmness that slices sharper than any insult. The internet pauses, comment sections flood. Reporters whisper, "Is Obama back?" The narrator leans in. He didn't return as a politician. He returned as a mirror, forcing America to see itself again. We cut between screens, Trump's theatrics, Obama's restraint. Two Americas, face to face, one trembling with rage, one unshaken. The music swells. The narrator's tone tightens with suspense. Because when the powerful mistake noise for truth and mockery for strength, history has a way of answering back. And as the camera freezes on Trump's defiant grin, a single line appears in white against the black. The moment Obama stepped in again, everything changed. A pause, a heartbeat, then the final whisper before the transition, and when Trump tried to strike back, he had no idea what storm was coming. The roar of the crowd fades, replaced by a timeline spinning backward, headlines flashing like warning lights. Second indictment hits Trump. Social media bans continue, legal walls closing in. Yet in every headline, his grin never fades. He thrives on the chaos, feeding off each scandal like it's proof of persecution. The narrator's voice threads through the noise. For some men, defeat is an ending. For others, it's an opportunity to rewrite the story, no matter how many lies it takes. Cut to Trump's private jet streaking across the sky, another rally ahead. Inside, he's rehearsing lines that sound less like policy and more like vengeance. "They tried to silence us," he mutters to aides. "But they can't erase greatness." His team nods, cameras roll, and the comeback tour begins. Not to build, but to blame. The rallies become ritual. Flags wave, anger sells. Each stage feels the same. The chants, the call-outs, the exaggerated grievances. He points fingers at elites, traitors, the fake media, stoking the fury that once carried him to power. But this time, something's different. The laughter feels forced, the applause rehearsed. The spell that once gripped the nation flickers. Meanwhile, Obama remains silent. No rallies, no outbursts. Just the stillness of a man who knows that noise eventually devours itself. Reporters speculate, why isn't he responding? But his silence is the response. While Trump performs for cameras, Obama meets with young leaders, speaks quietly in classrooms, urges civic patience. His absence from the spectacle becomes its own form of power. The narrator observes, in an age of shouting, silence becomes a rebellion. Trump senses it. Each headline that praises Obama's restraint seems to mock him. He's hiding, Trump insists to his followers. He's scared. But deep down, he knows it's not fear. It's strategy. Obama's calm has become a mirror reflecting everything Trump fears most: irrelevance. The tension swells like pressure before a storm. Two worlds, one addicted to chaos, the other disciplined by purpose, inch toward collision. Commentators call it the quiet war. Historians whisper that future generations will study this moment not as politics, but as psychology, the battle between dignity and desperation. The narrator continues, voice heavy with gravitas. This was never just about two men. It was about what kind of country America wanted to become, one defined by grievance, or one that still believed in grace. Clips flash. Trump pacing backstage, shouting at staff. Obama walking alone down a corridor, face unreadable. The world holds its breath. Because when truth goes quiet and lies grow louder, democracy trembles on a knife's edge. The noise is deafening, the fatigue real. But history has a way of finding balance, and it never favors the loudest voice for long. And then, in the midst of the noise, a rumor spreads, faint at first, then electric. Obama's returning to the stage. The narrator leans in, voice lowering to a hush. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about legacy. It was about reclaiming what leadership means, before it was too late. A final image. The date of Obama's speech circled in red, screens, lighting up, networks breaking news alerts, anticipation swelling across the nation. Until one moment, one speech, changed everything. He built an empire on spectacle. Before politics, before the podiums, Donald Trump understood one thing better than anyone else. Attention was power. Cameras were his oxygen. Every scandal, every insult, every outrageous claim kept his name alive in the bloodstream of America. He didn't just crave the spotlight, he engineered it. The narrator begins softly, almost analytical. Trump's brand of strength was never about truth. It was about dominance, the art of never appearing weak, even when the ground beneath him was crumbling. Cut to 2016, the golden era of his myth. Crowds stretching for miles, the media hooked on every outburst. Make America Great Again wasn't just a slogan, it was theater. Every rally felt like an episode, every insult a cliffhanger. He turned politics into a reality show where outrage became entertainment and cruelty was mistaken for charisma. And for a moment, it worked. The world watched in disbelief as he bulldozed tradition and turned the Oval Office into a stage. Supporters saw defiance, critics saw decay, but either way, everyone was watching. And that was all he needed. Then came 2020. The camera still loved him, but something had shifted in the eyes watching. The chaos that once electrified began to exhaust. The headlines that once made him invincible now carried weight. Indictments, investigations, and a pandemic that revealed the limits of bluster. Still, he smiled for the cameras, insisting, "I alone can fix it." But for the first time, the applause faltered. The narrator's tone deepens. There's a loneliness that follows men who mistake noise for connection. When the microphones turn off and the lights fade, silence becomes unbearable. Post-presidency, Trump tried to fill that silence with fury. The comeback tour was his attempt to relive the glory, to summon the same energy that once made him untouchable. But the magic was thinning. Former allies whispered doubts, advisors defected, courtrooms replaced campaign stages. The myth of invincibility began to fracture. Clips play, Trump declaring, "Obama was the worst president in history." The screen splits, side by side with charts showing Obama's enduring approval, his global respect, his quiet post-office influence. The contrast is brutal. The more Trump shouts, the smaller he seems beside Obama's calm presence. Narrator. Arrogance has a gravity. It pulls everything inward, until the world you built revolves around nothing but your own reflection. Trump's empire of fear begins to wobble. Once loyal voices on cable news distance themselves. Books from former insiders describe dysfunction. Yet he refuses to look inward. To him, the problem isn't the lie. It's that people stopped believing it. Footage rolls of him at Mar-a-Lago, hosting donors, insisting victory was stolen. The setting is lavish, but the energy hollow. The laughter feels strained. Even the chandeliers seem to flicker with unease. Then, the lawsuits mount. Judges reject baseless claims. Prosecutors circle. His once mighty social media army begins to fracture under fatigue. His new platform, once hyped as revolutionary, struggles for relevance. Still, he performs. Still, he insists. "We're stronger than ever," he bellows, even as his circle tightens. The narrator cuts in sharply. For a man addicted to attention, fading isn't defeat. It's death. There's almost a tragic poetry to it. A figure once commanding the world's lens, now shouting into an echo chamber of dwindling believers. The brand of strength he sold, loud, brash, unstoppable, is exposed as hollow performance. True strength, it turns out, was never about volume. It was about vision, but Trump can't stop. Every insult against Obama is recycled, exaggerated, desperate to sting. "He divided this country," he claims, ignoring how his own words tore through its fabric. The irony is cinematic. The man who thrived on chaos now gasps for order, the king of spectacle losing to silence. The narrator lowers his tone. In the fight, story of power, hubris is always the most predictable villain. It blinds you, isolates you, convinces you that applause is love and fear is loyalty. Images flash, late-night rants, courtroom sketches, old campaign footage fading into static. Then, over the static, Obama's voice echoes faintly from a past speech. Reality has a way of catching up. The static clears to Trump alone, scrolling through headlines that no longer worship him. His eyes harden. The comeback narrative tightens its grip. If the world won't believe in his legend, he'll force it to. The narrator breathes the line like prophecy. But while Trump doubled down, Obama was quietly preparing his response. One that would echo across the world. Before the crowds, before the Oval Office, before the legend. There was a boy, the son of a Kenyan student and a Kansan dreamer, growing up with more questions than certainties. Barack Obama's story began not with privilege, but with purpose. He was shaped by the quiet conviction that truth, even when whispered, carries farther than any shout. The narrator's tone softens, reverent. He learned early that identity could be both burden and compass. In classrooms where his name drew stares, he chose to speak with grace. In moments of doubt, he looked toward the horizon, not for escape, but for belonging. From Hawaii to Chicago's South Side, every street, every handshake, every setback etched into him the belief that leadership wasn't about power. It was about service. As a young organizer, he knocked on doors in neighborhoods forgotten by the powerful, listening to single mothers, laid-off workers, church elders. He didn't promise miracles. He promised to listen. And somehow, in an age of cynicism, that honesty felt radical. The narrator continues. His rise wasn't fueled by outrage, but by hope, a dangerous word in the hands of a cynic, but a lifeline in the hands of a believer. When Obama walked onto the national stage in 2004, declaring that there's not a liberal America and a conservative America, there's the United States of America, the country felt something it hadn't in years: unity, not uniformity. His words didn't divide, they reminded. Flash forward, the presidency. 8 years defined not by perfection, but by perseverance. Every crisis, the recession, terrorism, the weight of racial history, tested him. But through it all, he remained calm, deliberate, measured. Even when mocked for his composure, he refused to trade grace for noise. When they go low, Michelle reminded the nation, we go high. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a worldview. After leaving office, Obama didn't disappear into luxury or resentment. While Trump turned his presidency into performance, Obama turned his into purpose. He traveled to small towns and big cities alike, mentoring young leaders, launching foundations, sitting cross-legged in classrooms, listening to children speak about the future they wanted to build. Cameras sometimes caught him smiling quietly as a young immigrant student told her story. "That's what America looks like," he'd say. Simple words, yet they carried the weight of moral clarity. The narrator reflects, he had no throne to reclaim, only a truth to defend. Meanwhile, as Trump's noise grew louder, Obama's silence grew louder still. He resisted every temptation to fight fire with fire. Instead, he built patiently, a network of citizens, thinkers, activists, a generation raised on the idea that decency wasn't weakness. It was strength in its purest form. Critics called him detached. Supporters called him disciplined. But those who watched closely saw something else. Strategy. Obama knew that chaos burns itself out. Truth, on the other hand, waits. Clips flash Obama speaking to graduates. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to mean what you say. Another moment, sitting with veterans nodding, hands folded. Courage, he tells them, isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite it. Each scene contrasts the spectacle of Trump's rallies, the shouting, the finger-pointing, the fury, with Obama's quiet precision. One man thrives on applause, the other on reflection. One sells division, the other teaches understanding. The narrator's voice steadies. There are leaders who chase the camera and there are leaders who outlast it. In private, Obama was never oblivious to the chaos unfolding. He read the headlines like everyone else, felt the strain of lies polluting the truth he once defended. Yet he believed the fight wasn't his alone. Change, he had always said, doesn't come from one man. It comes from ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Still, as Trump's rhetoric escalated, distorting reality itself, even Obama's patience had limits. Those close to him recall moments of quiet frustration, the slow exhale, the tightened jaw. He knew, one advisor said later, that sooner or later he'd have to speak again. And when that time came, it wasn't to reclaim attention, it was to restore balance. He didn't plan a counterattack. He planned a reminder. The narrator leans in, voice low, cinematic. Because when Trump built a stage for outrage, Obama prepared a stage for truth. The day before his scheduled speech, a reporter asked if he was ready to confront Trump again. Obama smiled faintly. "It's not about confrontation," he said. "It's about conversation. The country needs to hear something different." Behind that calm tone was intent. A man who'd seen what anger could destroy, determined now to show what dignity could rebuild. As the scene closes, the tension tightens. News outlets buzz with speculation. The networks clear airtime. Analysts debate whether Obama can still command the nation's attention in a landscape dominated by spectacle. The narrator pauses, voice deep with inevitability. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the bar. The camera lingers on an empty stage, a single microphone under soft light, the hum of an expectant crowd just beyond the frame. The stage was set. The comeback rally would meet its reckoning. The night opens with noise. Trump stands center stage before a sea of red caps and roaring chants, basking in the chaos like a conductor of grievance. His voice booms through the speakers, part anger, part theater. "They stole it from us," he shouts, fist pumping. "But we're taking it back." The crowd erupts. Cameras flash. Flags wave. It's not a rally. It's a resurrection ritual, built on fury and nostalgia. The narrator cuts in, sharp and cinematic. To his followers, it's redemption. To his critics, it's delusion. But to Trump, it's survival. As the music blares and fireworks crackle overhead, a headline flashes across every network. Breaking news: Barack Obama to deliver rare national address tonight. The timing is no coincidence. Within minutes, phones buzz through the rally crowd. Reporters whisper. Anchors on cable news scramble to frame it. Obama versus Trump, round 2. The former president versus the man who tried to erase him. Trump notices the murmurs, the flicker of attention shifting. His grin tightens. "Oh, so he wants to talk tonight?" He sneers into the mic. "That's fine. Maybe he'll finally explain why he spied on my campaign." The crowd howls. The cameras catch his smirk. But there's a flash of something else beneath it. Unease. Because for all his bluster, Trump knows what Obama's words can do. Cut to the studio lights in Washington. Analysts buzz. We haven't seen Obama take a direct stand like this in years. Could this redefine the political landscape again? Can truth still compete with noise? The split screen begins. Trump in a stadium, Obama behind a podium. Two men, two Americas, one shouting to be believed, the other speaking to be understood. Obama steps onto the stage to a standing ovation. No music, no pyrotechnics, just silence and anticipation. He pauses, scanning the crowd with that signature calm, the quiet authority of someone who doesn't need to yell to be heard. Then, his voice, steady, deliberate, resonant. When leaders build fear instead of faith, they don't strengthen nations, they shrink them. The audience stills. Cameras zoom in. Even the pundits stop mid-sentence. The contrast couldn't be sharper, while Trump's rally still echoes with chants of "Lock him up" and "USA, USA." And Obama's tone is surgical, not angry, not defensive, but moral. He continues, "Some believe leadership is about domination, about making others feel small so you can feel tall. But history tells a different story. The strongest leaders lift people higher. They remind us that democracy is not a weapon, it's a trust." The narrator underscores the tension. In that instant, the air itself feels divided. One man sells resentment. The other restores reflection. The nation watches, torn between the spectacle and the soul. Back at Trump's rally, aides rush him an update. Obama's speech is trending worldwide. Hashtags flood social media. Obama returns. Truth over noise. Trump scowls, stepping back to the microphone. "He's lecturing again, folks. He talks pretty. But what did he ever do for you?" He laughs, but it sounds forced. The audience cheers, yet the edge of panic creeps in. For the first time that night, Trump isn't steering the storm. He's reacting to it. Meanwhile, Obama builds rhythm, his tone deepening. When truth is twisted, when lies go unchecked, when leaders trade empathy for ego, that's when nations lose their way. But I believe we can still find it, because our story isn't written by the loudest voice in the room. It's written by those who still believe in something better. Applause ripples through the hall, slow and rising. It's not just admiration, it's relief. A reminder that decency still has a pulse. The narrator weaves between the scenes. Two speeches. Two Americas. One built on grievance, the other on grace. And somewhere between them, the future itself hangs in the balance. As Obama's final words echo, real strength isn't in tearing others down. It's in lifting the truth back up. The camera cuts back to Trump, standing rigid on his stage. The crowd roaring, but his eyes scanning, uneasy. The narrator closes the scene with quiet gravity. And yet, no one, not the pundits, not the crowd, not even Trump himself, could have predicted what Obama would say next. Cliffhanger. Because the next sentence he spoke, the one that cut through the noise, the lies, the arrogance, would leave even his rivals stunned. The silence before his next words feels sacred, the kind of pause that doesn't just hold breath, but history. Obama looks out across the audience, hands resting lightly on the podium, eyes steady. For a brief moment, even the chaos outside and the pundit panels, the rally noise, the trending hashtags, seems to still. Then he speaks, slowly, purposefully. You can't rebuild a country by tearing it apart for applause. The sentence lands like a pin dropped in a cathedral. A beat passes. Then murmurs ripple through the crowd, quiet nods, a few claps, a collective inhale of realization. He continues, voice rising with conviction. Real strength isn't about volume. It's about vision. You don't prove your love for America by hating half of it. The audience bursts into applause. Some rise to their feet. Others stand frozen, hands over their hearts, as if trying to absorb the words before clapping. The narrator threads the moment with cinematic gravity. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. Every word was a mirror held to power, and for the first time in years, truth didn't whisper. It roared. Obama's cadence deepens, that measured rhythm that once carried him from Chicago streets to the global stage. "We can't afford to confuse chaos with courage," he says. "We can't mistake cruelty for strength. And we can't let nostalgia for a past that never truly existed steal our future from the generations that deserve better." Cut to the audience. Faces illuminated by stage light and emotion. Some smile through tears. Others record on their phones, hands trembling. A young student mouths, "Thank you." Across social media, the speech ignites. Hashtags explode. "Yes, Obama returns." "Iska truth over noise." "Leadership matters." Clips circulate within minutes. The pauses, the lines, the crowd's stunned silence. Within hours, millions are watching. Meanwhile, at Mar-a-Lago, Trump is glued to a muted television. His aides hover nervously as the Chiron flashes. Obama's speech dominates global headlines. The former president scowls. "Dominates?" he mutters. "We'll see about that." Moments later, his Truth Social account lights up. Post after post, each more furious than the last. "Failed President Obama preaching again." "Nobody wants lectures from the man who did nothing." Ratings were rigged, fake enthusiasm. The narrator cuts through the noise. For years, Trump had built an empire on spectacle. But this time, the spotlight turned into a mirror, and what it reflected wasn't strength, but desperation. As the night deepens, networks replay Obama's words alongside Trump's rants. The split screen tells the whole story. On one side, calm eloquence, moral gravity, crowds rising to their feet. On the other, rage tweets, misspellings, all caps fury. A late-night host sums it up with a smirk. One sounded like a leader. The other sounded like a guy losing Wi-Fi in the middle. A late-night host sums it up with a smirk. One sounded like a leader. The other sounded like a guy losing Wi-Fi in the middle of a tantrum. Laughter fills the studio, but the message underneath is serious. The contrast is undeniable. Back to Obama, wrapping his speech. His tone softens, eyes scanning the sea of faces before him. "We've been tested," he says quietly. By lies, by division, by the temptation to give up on each other. But that's not who we are. The American story, the real one, isn't about ego. It's about empathy. Not about tearing down, but building up together. He pauses again. The camera pans slowly, capturing every expression. Tears on a veteran's face. A young black woman standing tall, hands clasped, whispering, "Yes." Obama steps away from the mic, then turns back with one last truth, soft but unshakable. History doesn't remember the loudest voice. It remembers the one that told the truth when it mattered most. The crowd rises as one. It's not just applause in its release. A full-body exhale from a nation that had forgotten what dignity sounds like. The narrator's tone grows reverent. In a single evening, the myth of the comeback met the truth of the legacy. One man sought to reclaim relevance through rage. The other reclaimed hope through restraint. Clips of the moment sweep the internet. Obama's calm face framed by light. His final words echoing beneath orchestral crescendos. Tweets flood in from across the spectrum. Journalists calling it a masterclass in moral leadership. Celebrities writing, "This is what grace looks like." And ordinary Americans posting, "I finally felt proud again." Meanwhile, Trump's late-night meltdown deepens. At 2 a.m., another post appears. "Obama is a nobody without me." Commenters flood in, not with support but sarcasm. Screenshots of his misspellings trend alongside side-by-side clips of Obama's speech. Meltdown Monday becomes the top tag of the night. The next morning, the headlines are unanimous. Obama's words reverberate across the nation. Trump's response backfires spectacularly. A tale of two presidencies. The narrator returns. Voice low, cinematic. What happened that night wasn't a debate. It was a reckoning. One man's noise collided with another man's truth. And truth finally was louder. Obama exits the stage the same way he entered, without fanfare, without a triumphant wave. Just a quiet smile, a nod to the crowd, and a hand over his heart. The applause follows him out, swelling, unified, unstoppable. In that moment, Something intangible shifts. A collective awareness that this wasn't nostalgia. It was a reminder. That leadership built on decency doesn't fade. It waits. And when the nation needs it most, it returns. As the lights dim and the crowd chants his name, not as a politician, but as a symbol of conscience, the narrator delivers the emotional crescendo. Because leadership isn't about power. It's about presence. And when truth walks back into the room, lies lose their audience. The scene closes on a slow fade. Obama walking off stage into the corridor's half-light, the crowd's echo still thundering behind him. "Cameras flash," staffers whisper. Somewhere, a child watching at home asks their parent, "Why are people crying?" The parent smiles softly. "Because that's what it sounds like," they say, when hope speaks again. Cliffhanger. But that speech wasn't the end. It was the spark of something much larger. A movement waiting for its moment to rise. By dawn, the nation feels different. Cable networks loop the same 3 lines on replay. You can't rebuild a country by tearing it apart for applause. Real strength isn't about volume. It's about vision. History doesn't remember the loudest voice, only the one that told the truth when it mattered most. The hashtags begin their march before sunrise. Truth wins. Our Obama returns, our dignity speaks. Millions of posts, millions of voices, from city apartments to rural coffee shops, echoing the same sentiment. This is leadership. The narrator's tone carries a pulse of awe. It wasn't just a speech. It was a mirror. And when America looked into it, it saw what it had been missing. Morning news anchors struggled to contain their astonishment. "We haven't seen this level of bipartisan emotional response since 2008, one remarks. On another network, a conservative commentator sighs and admits, "You can disagree with him politically, but you can't deny the power of what we all just witnessed." Meanwhile, at Mar-a-Lago, the atmosphere has curdled into panic. Trump's aides rush between phone calls and interviews, trying to reframe the narrative. "The fake news is glorifying a washed-up president," one insists. Another fumbles through talking points about low ratings, unaware that Obama's address just broke streaming records. Reporters swarm. The questions get sharper. Why was your response so angry? Do you believe Obama struck a chord with the American people? The answers contradict each other within hours. Statements are revised, deleted, reposted. The narrator cuts in, cold and cutting. When truth trends, lies start to suffocate. Across the country, the speech becomes a cultural event. In classrooms, teachers play clips for their students saying, "Listen to this. This is how leaders speak." In living rooms, veterans sit forward, eyes wet, whispering, "That's the commander-in-chief, I remember." A young activist posts a video, tears in her eyes. He didn't shout. He didn't insult. He just reminded us that we're better than this. It racks up 3 million views in 6 hours. A retired nurse comments, "After years of noise, that silence between his words felt like oxygen." The ripple widens. Late-night hosts craft montages of Obama's lines against shots of cheering crowds. Musicians remix the speech into powerful choruses, clips of his words over piano chords. The refrain, "Truth wins," becoming a viral sound across TikTok. One journalist writes, "It felt like a national reset. A reminder that leadership isn't about being the loudest, but being the clearest." The contrast deepens as Trump's meltdown grows more chaotic. His team books him on every friendly outlet that will have him. He repeats the same lines. "It was all staged. People told me Obama begged for relevance." But each time the ratings dip lower. The public isn't laughing anymore. They're listening elsewhere. A split-screen montage plays across the nation's feeds. Obama's calm, centered presence juxtaposed with Trump's shouting, his finger jabbing at the air. The narrator overlays it like a moral echo. 2 men, 2 messages. One tried to reclaim power, the other restored purpose. In a small-town diner, a woman folds her newspaper and says softly to her husband, "I forgot what it sounded like, someone speaking for everyone." Her husband nods. "Yeah," he says. "It's been a long time since words felt like home." the sentiment catches fire. Commentators call it the speech America needed. Newspapers describe it as a return to moral gravity. Even international outlets headline it, "Obama rekindles hope in divided America." The narrator's voice swells with cinematic reflection. For a moment, the noise stopped. The chaos paused, and people remembered what it means when truth takes the microphone. But even in the celebration, there's a tremor beneath the surface, a sense that Obama's message carried more than inspiration. It carried a warning, clips replay of his closing words, his tone solemn, measured, almost prophetic. The future doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who listen and act with conscience. Analysts replay the line over and over. Was it just reflection or foreshadowing? In the afterglow of praise, something deeper begins to stir. Comment sections fill not just with admiration, but with questions. What happens next? Who will pick up where he left off? Is this the beginning of something bigger? The narrator weaves through the tension. Hope had been reignited. But hope, once awakened, demands direction. The people were ready, not for nostalgia, but for movement. As twilight falls over the day after, images flood screens, candles lit at vigils, murals painted overnight, crowds gathering in parks holding signs that read, "Truth wins and dignity speaks." The narrator closes with quiet resonance. It began as a speech. It became a statement, and by nightfall, it was something more. A collective memory of who America still could be, cliffhanger. And yet, Obama's closing words carried a warning, one that still echoes, a reminder that truth may triumph for a night. But its survival depends on what we do when the lights fade. The screen fades to black before replaying Obama's final line, his voice measured, unwavering, carrying the quiet weight of conviction. Democracy isn't a reality show, it's a responsibility. For a moment, silence. Then the narrator enters, low and reflective. In that single line, he exposed the difference between fame and legacy, between being watched and being remembered, between living for the spotlight and living for something larger than yourself. Clips roll of Trump's rallies, the chanting crowds, the confetti, the defiance. The narrator continues. For years, America mistook volume for vision. It was easy to. Spectacle is addictive. Anger feels powerful when it fills a room. But when the noise clears, only truth remains standing. Cut to Obama's speech. No pyrotechnics, no chaos, just presence. And that was the quiet revolution of that night, the narrator says. The reminder that real leadership doesn't perform. It serves. The tone softens, introspective now. Trump's so-called comeback was never about redemption. It was about attention, a mirror held up to a country wrestling with its own reflection. His rise fed on division, his rhetoric on grievance. But his struggle to stay relevant revealed something deeper, a truth America could no longer ignore. Images of ordinary people filled the screen. Nurses walking home after late shifts, students organizing voter drives, veterans raising flags outside modest homes. Because while one man fought to reclaim power, millions were rediscovering purpose. They saw in Obama's calm, not nostalgia, but guidance. A reminder that leadership isn't about who shouts the loudest, but who stands the longest. Obama's voice echoes again. You can't rebuild a country by tearing it apart for applause. The narrator answers, and with that, he reframed everything. In a world addicted to outrage, he gave silence meaning again. In an era where fame felt like leadership, he redefined what endurance looks like. Clips transition between the two men, Trump pacing a rally stage, shouting into the void. Obama walking off into the shadows, head high, the crowd behind him chanting not for power, but for principle. This wasn't just a political contrast, the narrator says. It was a moral one. One man built a brand, the other built a legacy. And the night their paths crossed, America remembered the difference. Soft music swells under images of diverse faces, children watching the speech with wide eyes. A farmer wiping tears, a soldier saluting the screen. Truth doesn't shout, the narrator continues. It endures. Leadership isn't about being followed. It's about what you leave behind when the crowds go home. Then a beat. A moment of reflection. Obama reminded the nation that dignity isn't weakness, it's discipline. That democracy isn't entertainment, it's engagement. And that every citizen, no matter how tired or disillusioned, carries a piece of that responsibility. Clips of young people organizing, elders voting, strangers embracing at candlelight vigils blend into a montage of hope. Because in the end, the narrator says, the battle between truth and noise isn't fought on stages or in headlines. It's fought in hearts, in the choice to listen, to care, to believe again. As the montage fades, we see Obama's silhouette leaving the stage, the light falling behind him. The crowd's cheers soft but unending. His speech wasn't about politics. It was about preservation, of decency, of trust, of the belief that America, even bruised, could still choose better. The narrator's voice lowers to a whisper, reverent and certain, and that's why his words linger. Because power fades, popularity fades, but principle, that lives on. A final line of text appears across the screen, white against black. Integrity doesn't need applause. It only needs time, the narrator closes, because even when the noise fades, the truth keeps speaking, steady, patient, unbreakable, waiting for us to listen. Cliffhanger. And as the echoes of that night continued to spread, one question began to rise above the rest. If truth is speaking again, will America finally answer? The shocking truth about Trump's comeback battle with Obama is that it was never about two men. It was about who we are as a nation, about whether we measure greatness by noise or by nobility, by chaos or by character. That night, America wasn't just watching a speech. It was witnessing a test of its own reflection. Because when the shouting fades and the lights dim, what remains isn't spectacle, it's substance. And in that silence, Obama's words still echo. Democracy isn't a reality show. It's a responsibility. That's the truth that outlives every headline. The truth that doesn't age, doesn't trend, it endures. Through every storm of division, through every season of outrage, dignity always finds its way back. Calm courage doesn't need a stage. It needs conviction. And leadership built on truth doesn't collapse when the cameras turn off. It stands, quietly, like a lighthouse cutting through fog. If you believe America deserves leaders who lead with integrity, share this story. Let it reach the people who've forgotten what honesty sounds like. Subscribe. Be part of the movement that refuses to bow to lies, that refuses to let cynicism become our new normal. Because the future doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the steadfast. And remember this, truth doesn't just survive chaos. It redeems it. Every time we choose empathy over ego, principle over pride, we prove that democracy isn't dying. It's waiting to be defended. Because when voices like Obama's rise above the noise, they don't just win debates, they remind the world what decency sounds like. And that sound is the real comeback America's been waiting for.